Good morning. Good morning. Guten Morgen. It's interesting to think about words. How are words interesting, James? I'll tell you how words are interesting because I actually used to think, I don't know if I still do, slightly, somewhat. I used to think, like, words are just words. They mean nothing. Really, what means something are the actions you take. You know, when you hear it all over the shop, you hear a picture. No. Yeah, well, that's one. A picture's worth 1,000 words. Which, that's an interesting little saying there because you could think, what does that mean? Well, for each person, they see this picture and it means 1,000 words for them. What is the likelihood that the 1,000 words they think up perfectly overlap with the 1,000 words you think up? Good luck. And then that with each person, you know. So this picture actually has different meanings for everyone, but it means 1,000 words at least. So I used to think of words as actually really useless in different areas of life as well. Like, imagine the area of relationships. I used to think there's no point saying what's on my mind. For one thing, am I even able to do that? Am I even able to translate the thought that I'm having that seems to make an awful lot of sense to me into English and transmit it to another person's mind? That's maybe one thing that stopped me. Without having that person like blow up at me when they misinterpret what I'm trying to say, completely understandably, because I'm fumbling about. I can barely say what I'm trying to say, you know. One reason. Another reason why I think words are just... Oh, sorry, that's one area of life. Another area of life where words just seem useless, flippant, too light, given the weight of the situation, is when you're thinking about the world and you're thinking about all the shit that's going on. It's like, what am I going to do about this? Oh, I'm going to talk about it. What? Talk about it? That's doing nothing about the situation. And that's true. That's actually doing nothing about the situation. So there's that part of me. And that's a real part of me. Then there's another part of me that's also real, but is maybe a bit more only recently come to the fore, that says, here's like a sort of a trippy thought. It says something like this. Think about all the people. Okay, there's like a cognitive space that emerges as a result of the machinations of everybody's cognition going on all day, every day, all over the world. Okay, think about the world actually. Lots of people are asleep half the time, and there's like a wave of sleeping and waking. But the people who are asleep are dreaming. The people who are awake, their conscious minds are active and working. And all of them have agendas, not in a sort of a malicious or in a nefarious sort of a way. I'm just saying, everybody has stuff that they want to get done, and they think about it and then they do it. So, in the thinking and doing, there's a space where the words come into this, Jamesy. Words come into this because that's a cognitive space. You can, with your words, change that space. However slightly it is, you can try and expand your influence. And if you want to go about it in that sort of a way where you explicitly focus on the expansion of your influence, good luck. Good luck to you. You'll do it, but you'll be constrained. It's like, for example, if you want to become a politician, to change the world however way you see fit, there are certain selective pressures that are exerted on you as a human throughout the course of your journey to the political position you seek that actually beat out of you the very principles or ideals that you began with in the first place, and that drove you to become a person of political power. Why did I use that as an analogy for what? Yeah, so if you try and spread your word, and you one of your main goals or your priority is for it to be distributed as widely as possible, then there's going to be selective pressures exerted on you that's going to change your message. It's actually going to change your message. Because it's certain messages that are propagated via the virality mechanisms on the social media platforms in that landscape, and certain other messages are just not, they don't gain that momentum, which you can find as sort of a niche, which is what I'm looking for. So, words. That is why I'm trying to use the words I'm using for, well, two reasons at least. One is I would like to be able to articulate myself. Simple as. I think I have thoughts. I think I have ideas about the world, how it is, how it shouldn't be, which is better than how it should be. You know, Taleb has this point in his book, Anti-Fragile. He says something like, you're better off knowing what you don't want than knowing what you want. Or you're better off behaving in the world in such a way that you figure out, okay, I don't want that, than trying to go for what you want. And I think the point is, this is how I interpreted it anyway. Yeah, I could be completely off the mark here, but this is how I interpreted it. I said, oh, when you say you want something, how do you know you want it? Because you've never had it. So you don't actually know what it's like to have that. So how do you know from your naive and ignorant position that you want that? Whereas when you encounter something, you do it and you realize, I don't want that. You're fully sure, oh, I've experienced it. I know I don't want that. And that's like, now you can use that information to adjust your course. Chick, chick, in this life. Chick, 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 beep. Changing direction. You can use that as information. Useful information to change direction. Though, being able to articulate myself, but also just getting myself out there. I just want to, I just want to have a bit of fun in this world, even though it's quite bonkers. Here's sometimes how I think of it. Imagine I was a Viking back in the day. They had their society. They had their dangers. They had their people who were dangerous. Looking back from the perspective of now, I'd be like, yeah, buddy, I'm only too happy to get in there. Like, not stupidly and just like have myself killed by the equivalent of the mafia in the Viking world. No. But get in there and shake things up. Figure out, okay, how is this working? Why is it working like that? And how do I steer it in a different direction? I see the boys just plundering and causing real mayhem in other people's lives. And I'm like, I don't really like that. And I think then, how do I infiltrate that whole culture and try and convince them that what they're doing is pretty shitty and that they should probably focus their energies elsewhere? I don't know. That's an interesting thought. Now, take that thought and project it onto now. You in the future, no, not you, but someone like you is looking back at you now in the current world and society, thinking, I wish I was James. I could have gotten in there and shook things up and really, made the most of my life. But here I am, poor me, in the future, 2250, The world has gone to shit, and I can't do anything about it. Yeah, you can. There's always something to do, buddy. Anyway, that's for the guy in the future. Talking about us here now. Why can't we just get in there and shake things up? Actually figure out how to get in there and shake things up. Figure out, there's a cognitive space. There's a cognition space. And certain things affect that space, which in turn affects real world action. So how can I actually wield a message that is like effective in reaching the cognitive space, in influencing it, and in changing people's subsequent actions as a result of their having absorbed the message and, you know, been changed, influenced by the message, how they interpreted it. And that's like a key, is people interpret messages differently. Back to the point about pictures and 1,000 words. 1,000 words. That's a lot of words. That's like a mini essay. Yep, that's a mini essay. If I bang out 1,000 words in a day, I'm happy. So that's a lot of work. And if a picture is 1,000 words, and you think that my 1,000 words are going to be the same as your 1,000 words, it's good. No way, Jose. So that's words. They actually do mean something. They are useful. And it's really key to, because if you think about it, look, you have all your thoughts going on in your head. This was actually the point that I wanted to get at the beginning of this video. What are we in, 12 minutes in? If you think about it, you are a human who just goes about every day. The only way people can gain access to you as an individual, you as a unique person, you as somebody with his or her own perspective on the world. The only way people can gain access to that is if you allow them. And how do you allow them? You allow them by transmitting certain key thoughts that would suggest to the person you're communicating with, here's how I view the world. What do you make of that? And what do you make of me as a result? And I don't think we do this enough. Really, I don't think we do this enough. I'll be here, sitting here, fomenting. I'm sitting here and I'm just thinking. Crazy thoughts. Thoughts that, were I to try and translate them into the English language, I would be sat here all freaking day. It would take me all day to try and find the right words that actually speak to the thoughts that I'm having and the feelings that arise as a result. So I have to get real with myself and say, wait, James, if you're going to have these thoughts, you have to be able to transmit them to other people. Because if you can't, you are actually just, it's mental masturbation. You are just rotting away in your seat, in your chair. Nobody knows what you're thinking about but you. You don't even know what you're thinking about. So please, for the love of God, for the sake of you and your sanity, speak. And then people get to form a picture of who you are. And in their forming that picture and reflecting it back to you, you get to understand yourself better. Honest to God, you get to understand yourself better. You get to see, oh, that's what I'm fucking interested in. And suddenly, people who are interested in you start, when you're in conversation with them, you know, in a social scene, in a social setting, which previously was just boring and full of scheisse, feeling scheisse. Just so boring. Muy aburrido. You find these people who have taken a liking to you, now speak about things that you're interested in. Suddenly, almost spontaneously, they just say, what about that thing you were talking about earlier on? Or, they'll riff on something that was said earlier on that was quite interesting to you. Whoa. We're in a different world. Because usually the topics of conversation in such settings are boring as fuck. And that is partly because you haven't revealed to others how non-boring you are. So of course they're just going to resort to the default mode boring scheisse. What do you expect? What do you expect? They don't know you. You need to reveal to them, oh listen, actually, believe it or not, people who can think still exist. And I'm one of them. So, would you like to engage in dialogue? Assisted thinking. Assisted thinking. That's a good one. That's actually, I'm pretty sure that is the function of the conscious, active mind. Is not. This fucking dovetails nicely with what I was saying. Consciousness, man. Consider consciousness as just that portion of your cognition which can be transmitted. Alright, that's pretty key. Okay, now there's thoughts going on that I can't quite articulate, but I'll leave them and I'll try. I won't try to articulate them, but I guess in the course of my next paragraph is something approximating what I'm trying to say will be said. If we consider that the definition of consciousness, then you will see that the key to consciousness, and perhaps its main function, one of its main functions, okay, because you can think of all traits as having multiple functions. Of course, there's no trait that is sort of, I'm talking about evolved biological traits. There's no trait that is so specialized that it can only do one thing. Like the thumb, for example. The thumb can do many things. There's lots of things you can do with your thumb. You can grab things with it. But then there's other stuff you can do with it. And what are you going to tell me? That the other stuff is the main stuff and this is the secondary stuff? Okay, I don't know. But the point I'm trying to get at is there's many functions to a given trait. Consciousness, one of its main functions, is communicating or transmitting ideas to other people. And then a sort of a secondary function of that, it's almost like, you can think of it almost as an unfortunate byproduct, but I think of it as fortunate. I like my inner world. A fortunate byproduct of that is the individual being able to engage in conversations or their equivalent when it's in a one-person format with themselves. They get to actually think about the world. But that's like a secondary function. You have to understand the primary function. And I think we've got it backwards, obviously. We've got so many things backwards in this world today. That's why so many people are so fucked up. We think to ourselves, because this is a hyper-individualistic society that we're living in. So we think to ourselves that everything that's going on in my mind to myself is the most important thing. Really. Nobody has a fucking clue what's going on in your mind. And you think that that's the most important thing? That's a bit weird. That's a bit self-indulgent. That's a bit, you can almost go as far as to say that's a bit narcissistic. You're completely enamored by yourself. Just stop. You're not even that cool. The coolest people. No, that's unfair. You're pretty cool, but refine your coolness. Okay, I think I've gone off the rails a bit here, but the point being, the main function of this consciousness thing is to communicate with others, and that's where the juice of life is. I swear to God, people. It's all about people. It really is. People are the most important thing in this world, in this life, and it's about being able to sustain, maintain good relationships. That way you get to sustain your sanity. Otherwise, you are setting yourself up for a disaster. And it will be a sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because you will have done nothing about it. But I'm trying... Here, look. I'm reaching out my hand. You can fix yourself up. It's actually quite easy. Just start talking. Just start putting words to your thoughts. Initially to yourself maybe, and then to others. And get the feedback. And refine that shit. And you're good to go. You're good to go. Alles gut. Alles zusammen. Und alles gut.